as I was already introduced, I will be talking about the lessons that we've learned building a remote culture. I'm Kaylie, People and Culture Manager at LaterPay. So before I jump into the remote team, remote culture, let me start by telling you a little bit about what we do at LaterPay. So our main job is to convert users of digital content and digital services into happy customers. We do this by giving users a frictionless way to read, use, watch, or play now, and leave the frustrating stuff that people don't want to deal with, like registering a new account or paying until later after they've consumed content worth of $5 or €5. That combined with the possibility to aggregate or collect content over different websites is what makes our product pretty cool, if I may say so myself. So as I already said, we're 15 people distributed over 13 countries right now. And we pretty much started off as a remote team from day one. So let's talk about what it means to go remote. These days you hear, see, and read a lot about how it's so popular to let your team members work from home. And they say that remote is the future. And yet I hear a lot of resistance and maybe also fear about going remote as a company. And the main concern is that managers will lose control. So you won't know what your team is working on, if they're working on the right thing, or even if they're working at all. And that's just because you can't check on your team members just by walking by their desk or their workstation. So other things that management teams worry about are that distractions at home will result in lower levels of productivity. They worry that people will disconnect from their team and won't have good collaboration with the rest of the team. And last but not least, they worry that they won't be able to build or maintain a proper culture. Now, these fears may seem reasonable at first, but there are a lot of strong reasons to at least consider going remote. And I think they're definitely worth it. I think we know most of these already, so I won't spend too much time on them. But basically, through hiring remotely, you access a wider talent pool as well as a more diverse talent pool. The added flexibility attracts highly talented people. You have reduced costs like office costs and commuting costs, as well as commuting time. And we avoid office distraction. And it's been proven that people working remotely actually have higher productivity levels than people working in a traditional office setting. That added flexibility that's often combined with a better work-life balance also reduces employee turnover. Sounds pretty great, right? I think so too. So with those amazing benefits in mind, what should you take into consideration when you're building a remote team and thus a remote culture? I've got 5 key learnings that I'd love to share with all of you. The first one is to define your values and establish your culture. So if you want to build a strong company culture or even team culture, your values will serve as the foundation of that culture. You can go remote, build a team, and hope for the best. And it might turn out well if you're lucky. But if you want to build a culture, or perhaps even keep a culture that's grown to life organically, it's time to define your values. And once you've established those values, you need to talk about them repeatedly so that people know what your company stands for. And most importantly, you need to actually live by your values. LaterPay is the first distributed company that I've worked for, but it's also the company that has the most defined culture that I've experienced. So defining our values was quite a big project. It took surveys, a lot of analysis of the responses to those surveys, multiple conversations with team members and also with the management team. And today our values, they live on our website, on our internal wiki. They're part of our onboarding processes as well as our feedback processes. We take them to our team events and we do our very best to lead by example. And whenever we fail to lead by example, you can be sure that at least one of our team members will flag it to me or the management team so that we know we have something to improve and what exactly to improve. If we're being real, setting values, living those values, and thus building your culture is actually not only for remote teams, but it's crucial for any team and any company. On to my second, or our second learning. Going remote requires a bit of a brain shift. And if you don't deliberately make that shift, the chances that you'll have a healthy and successful remote culture is quite slim. Have you ever been in a meeting where most people were physically in the meeting room, but one or two people called in remotely? If so, you probably know that it often feels like those colleagues calling in remotely aren't really there. And that's how it feels for them as well. It's much harder to participate. So what do you do in that case? It might seem a bit ridiculous at first, but if anyone's calling in remotely, have everybody call in remotely. Don't even book a meeting room. Or even better, have everybody call in remotely by default. That was something that we had to learn as well, more by trial and error than anything else. And today, we'll still sometimes have two people sharing one laptop to call into a meeting, but that's generally the limit. It's important that you create an environment that's inclusive to your remote colleagues, and the only way to do that is to think remote first. So how does that work in principle? Well, say you happen to bump into a colleague or you have a call and you start talking about a specific project and you start discussing next steps on that specific project. At LaterPay, we expect you to, after that call or after that encounter, to write down those next steps and share it with the rest of the team. Did a Slack discussion get really, really long and wasn't getting solved? That's fine. Hop on a call, get it sorted, figure it out, but don't forget to document the outcome and share it with the rest of the team afterwards. You've got a decision to make, but you need input from the team. Make sure that you leave enough time for your team members from other time zones to give their input as well. To summarize, the documentation and the type of asynchronous communication go a long way. Oh, I lost my light. It's fine. It's important to inspire and motivate your team members and the whole team, and to be transparent about your goals, your strategy, your values, etc. That's the case whether you're remote or not, but I think it requires a little bit more effort when you have a remote team. So when you hire remote team members, you want to look for people who are self-motivated, who can keep up their energy levels, even if they don't have regular in-person contact with the rest of their team. But the thing is, you can hire the perfect people for remote work. If you don't evolve them and include them in what's going on, it won't matter. If you want people to care, you need to give them something to care about. Be clear, open, and empathetic about what's going on within the company, what's going on within the team, and also be clear and open about the context behind certain decisions. You want to make sure that you're involving people and you're basically allowing them to care. This is important in a company at the very top, but also on other levels. So also within teams or departments, as well as across teams and departments. So remember to share what the sales team is doing with the engineering team and vice versa, or even better, let them do it themselves. One way to promote transparency is by communicating in public by default. In our case, at LaterPay, that means encouraging people to have discussions and to ask their questions in public Slack channels by default. Why? First reason is that communication in private channels cannot be corrected or elaborated on if it's incorrect. And second reason is that someone you may not have considered might really benefit from the information that you're sharing. We also put a premium on documenting everything. We know that documentation is a lot easier to create, and that it's a lot harder to actually keep it up to date. But we do encourage people to help update documentation when they see that it's no longer accurate. Another thing that we do is we have a Slack channel specifically for updates, where different teams provide a weekly update on the status of their projects. By documenting and sharing what we do like that consistently, we avoid building knowledge silos as much as possible. Another practice that we have adopted is to hold company-wide calls every week to update the team on what's going on, present special topics, and much more. For example, right before the holidays, our management team presented the plans and top level goals for the first quarter of 2020. So they had previously held an on-site planning meeting with the entire management team, and then less than 1 week later, they were able to share with the entire company what the outcome of that planning week was, and that made it so that we could all go into our holidays knowing what to expect when we were going to come back after.
Kaylie, sorry for interrupting. Can you please turn on the light? It's really dark.
Yeah, I have to put off the headphones real quick.
Sure. Go ahead.
All right, better? Cool, perfect.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll go to the next one. As a remote team, or when you're building and developing a remote culture, you can't count on people building relationships simply by running into each other at the coffee machine, in the kitchen, during lunch, etc. You have to make a deliberate effort to help people connect and build relationships. You have to support your team and give them opportunities to connect with each other, while also making clear that it's actually part of their job to connect with each other, build those relationships, make sure that they understand each other, and that's in order to build a solid foundation for good collaboration. We encourage people to schedule time with each other just to catch up with each other. I used to end those catch-ups with saying, all right, gotta go back to work now. That was until a colleague of mine actually told me offered, saying that these catch-ups, where we kind of just check in with each other, are work, and very important work at that. And that colleague was so right. So For LaterPay, this means that we're encouraging people to check in with each other regularly. Also during onboarding, so right at the start of their career with us, I help new team members to set up a bunch of meetings with different key people in the team. Not only to have an overview of the different projects that are going on or to get an introduction to the product, but well, it's still a big part of the onboarding, of course, but to meet these people outside of their direct team and to build a foundation for that relationship. That way, it's much easier to reach out to them after later on. What else? We also have a Slack bot called Donut that a lot of you may know already. This one, the Slack bot pairs up people randomly every 2 weeks in our case, and kind of gives our people a nudge to catch up with each other. We also have in our Slack a bunch of social channels that are for non-work related chatter, basically, like pets, which is my all-time favorite. It's the one that I check, the first channel that I check after I come back from a holiday. But also channels about art, music, wellness, etc. We also organize an all hands twice a year. Our all hands is a company-wide team event where we bring the whole team together in one location for 5 days. There we do update presentations, workshops, and we give the different teams also time to do their own thing. And of course, there's a lot of food and drinks, which is a great connection maker as well. Meeting these 2 times a year, so these all hands we have twice a year, it's really a lot of fun, but it's not that much time to actually spend time together. And we do realize, and we have seen this as well within our team, that people really love spending time with each other at LaterPay. So we recently also decided to let our team members use part of their personal development budget to also travel and meet with and work alongside their colleagues. Fifth learning, the last one, is to focus on the people. So when you don't regularly get to see your colleagues in person, and you mostly see them as avatars within Slack or within a meeting, a video meeting, it's very easy to forget that you're dealing with actual people and not avatars or Yoda-like Smurf creatures. No kidding. This is our CEO's profile picture in our Slack. So even though you're not all at the same office, you don't run into each other when you're getting water or you're getting yourself a coffee, and you can't go out for dinner together or get drinks afterwards, you're still a team and you're still there to build amazing things together and support each other doing that. You can still make time to share experiences, whether they're work experiences or private experiences, brainstorm, or just talk things through. So it's incredibly important to actively remind yourself that you're working with people, to be empathetic towards them and be there to support and celebrate with them. At the end, in my opinion, you get back what you put in when it comes to collaboration, support, trust, and respect. So before I wrap up and open the floor for questions, I'll just reiterate those 5 lessons one more time. First one is to make sure that you define your values, put in that effort, live by your values, and establish your culture that way. You want to make sure that you think and react remote first to be inclusive to your remote employees if you're not 100% remote. You're probably not being transparent enough, so step it up a notch. Making a connection and building a relationship between people has to be a deliberate effort. and you want to make sure that you keep the focus on the people. So I'm sure I've spoken enough. I would love to have lots of time for questions and answers. So thank you for your attention. We're hiring, and let's go to the questions.